real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, we're back with you again, and it's Nathan Romas with you here. And today we're going to be talking to one of our brothers from, I guess, across the street from where I work in hall number 1. It's Steve Ferry, firefighter with the Edmonton Fire Rescue Services. So welcome, Steve.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to give a little bio, and then we're going to get into it because I think we got a lot of good things to talk about today. So Steve's originally from the Lacombe-Ponoka area of Alberta. In 2001, Steve joined the military right out of high school. He worked with the PPCLI. It's the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry for a couple of years. I always thought that was the longest name. Maybe they can figure out a way to shorten it at some point. But then you moved to the reserves as a medic and kind of worked on your education component. You became a primary care paramedic. And then as the Afghanistan war was picking up, you had gone back to full service in the regular force, where you deployed to Afghanistan in both 2008 and 2009. And then from there, you moved into some different operations with the forces. So you moved over to CANSOF, which is a term we'll use throughout our conversation. That's the Canadian Special Operations Forces. With them, you're deployed twice to Iraq. You completed several small team missions as well. And in 2018, you switched from military service to Edmonton Fire. And that's where you're at today. Steve also commits a bunch of time to family. You do a bunch of training on the side. You train police officers in a lot of the medical rescue stuff. And you still work with some of the military folk. So we'll kind of get into this. And man, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, I try to stay busy, absolutely.
Yeah. So kind of if you want to take us back to the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
What growing up was like.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If I could though, I learned in high school social class, it never hurts to start a conversation with a quote. But today I thought it would be good to start with a small joke.
All right, give her.
If that's all good. I ran this by a couple people. They were all firefighters, so it's a bit biased. But what do police officers and firefighters have in common?
Oh, you got to remember this is going to be listened to by a lot of cops. So
yeah,
you're
that's
make them
okay.
angry.
That's okay. They can figure it out on the ice rink or something where I might be.
Well, what is it?
They both want to be firefighters.
Oh, geez. Well, you know what? You're not wrong. You're not wrong in a bunch of aspects.
Well, anyways, that's the icebreaker for the conversation.
Well, we're sitting across the street and we see you guys playing hockey. And what else do you play in there? What was the one they were saying the other day? Pickleball?
Yeah,
can you play that in there?
Maybe we don't like to divulge our secrets, but
yeah, you guys do have all the windows taped up. You can't see in there; it's all boarded up. Secrets.
Station 1 is busy. We don't have much time for that kind of stuff.
But. Yeah. No. Start us at the beginning. Let's talk about how Steve got into military and fire service.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you having me here. I appreciate you having like a platform for these open conversations. Your last guests have been super interesting too. I hope I can be the same while being candid and, of course, not making people mad after my joke there. But yeah, I grew up in Lacombe-Ponoka. I'm a lucky guy. My dad worked very, very hard. He worked long hours to make sure I could play sports and do all the things I wanted to do. My mom stayed home and made sure we always had healthy food and enough of it, and helped us get to the rink on time or to the ball diamond on time. And when I was a little kid, I just always wanted to be a soldier. I used to draw little soldiers. I had little toy soldiers to play with. I loved G.I. Joe. And I just thought that was always the career for me. And when I was still in high school, I applied for the military. And then shortly after graduating, I headed off to Quebec for my basic training. And then it was kind of kicked off from there.
How, so you go to Quebec for basic?
Yeah, some people do. There's a huge complex out there. I think it's still called the Mega, but it's in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, just outside of Montreal. And it's just a massive complex where a lot of leadership and recruit training occurs.
It's the puppy mill for the military.
A little bit, yeah. But, we've got Wainwright just east of town here where a lot of folks have done basic. But that's kind of the main place for basic training. They have all the facilities. They have all the staff, and that's kind of the hub for everybody when they start in the military.
So do you get a choice? Like, could you choose to go to Wainwright?
No, they tell you
Okay.
where you're going. Yeah.
So they started early. We're going to tell you where you're going.
Absolutely.
And that's what's coming for the next few years.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that was my first time ever getting on an airplane at 18 years old, was to join the Army.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm kind of curious when you're talking about the training that you might go through for some of the conversations we've had, some of the training you go through for the Army, and just kind of comparing that to police training. I would say it's probably going to be more equivalent to what I experienced going through depot with the RCMP. It is very paramilitary, very regimented, very structured. Everything was on time, and it was a lot of rank and file. Edmonton police training, not so much. And I've talked about this on prior podcasts where it's considered more adult learning. And when I came through here, it was a little more like that. There was still some kind of drill, some of those programs that kind of go back to the military style. But what was basic training like for you?
Well, I enjoyed it. It was very, very hard. Like I said, it was my first time away from home. I was very, very young. But as soon as you walk through that door, you meet people who are in the exact same situation. And it's in your best interest to get along. It's in your best interest to be good teammates. But it was certainly intimidating, because that's also the first time I really got yelled at, or, you don't have a choice. I remember putting my hands on the sergeant's desk when we got to the base late at night, and first thing he said was, "Get your hands off my desk." You don't even know where to go from there. But I thought it was a great experience. I made a lot of lifetime friends, and I learned a lot of really important lessons in life. And training soldiers is not just about yelling and making people do things that they don't want to do. You're setting people up to fight. And something small like taking care of a locker. If you can't iron the clothes, keep it organized, follow a system with a locker, how do we trust you with a machine gun?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't make your bed properly, how can we trust you to do anything properly? It doesn't get easier from basic training. It simply gets harder.
Yeah.
So if you can't do the little things right, you're not going to do the big things right. And you're certainly not going to do them under duress. There's kind of a quote out there that one of my mentors taught me. And it's like, how you do something is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make a crappy bed, you'll do other things crappy too.
I think people, maybe they think it's all about shooting the guns and stuff, but yeah, you're not making your bed. You can't pay attention to the little details, because they give you, fold it this much, the sheets, and iron out the pillow, and there's a whole bunch of steps to it and procedure. You can't do your paperwork properly, and you can't, for police, you can't do court testimony properly. So it translates into a whole gambit of skills that you require for the job. So yeah, I definitely can appreciate that, what you're saying. And I remember being at depot, there was, we were up at 4 a.m. to get to Parade Square for 6. So we would be up ironing, making the beds, ironing the beds too. You're making sure your bunkmate, like, so the person across the hall from you, you were just as responsible for that person as you were for your own stuff. So it was a lot more teamwork, and it really helped you build a lot of camaraderie that way too, which I think is a lot of stuff that's missing in today's job, whether it's police or, I don't know about fire, but I'd imagine that's a huge component of a lot of the stuff you teach and do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you brought up the 4 a.m. timings as well. That kind of goes with the locker and the bed. If you don't meet timings in the military, there's serious consequences. If you're expected to be in position at this time, you need to be in position at that time, no matter how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to do these things. And yeah, I think hardship, it creates a stronger team. There's you got your brotherhood, sisterhood through hardship. That's a real thing. When you're put through the ringer together, you're a better, stronger team.
Yeah. Well, so where do you go from basic training? So what's kind of your career path?
Yeah, we left Quebec, and we got on a bus, and we headed to the airport, and we flew back to Edmonton. I'm lucky enough to be from Alberta. I love Alberta, and and having Edmonton Garrison, which is probably, one of the best facilities in the country, just north of home was amazing. So yeah, we got on a plane, we flew to Edmonton, but we went straight to Wainwright to start our infantry training.
Did you go home at all in between, or is it like actually straight off the plane, you're straight to the base?
Yeah, we went straight to Wainwright, but then immediately we were able to take some holidays. And, at that point we were living in Ponoka, and, my folks, I think I jumped on a bus from Wainwright to Edmonton and met my parents on Edmonton South Common. I remember that too, because I was sure happy to see them.
Yeah. And what can you talk about, like, some of the training you go through as being in basic? Like, what are some of the drills or things that you get taught out there?
Yeah, the infantry training was certainly to the next level. In basic, you have everybody, and again, I'm speaking for 20 years ago too. I hope I'm not that out of touch, but I think I'm pretty close. We had all trades in basic. So you've got, your infantry guys, your clerks, your Air Force mechanics. Everybody's in the same pool for basic, and then you move off to your different locations for specific training. The infantry training was certainly like difficult. As a 19-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, it was hard. Like, if you've never been cold and hungry before, being cold and hungry gets really, really hard. Living in the bush in January is not something you just go do. You have to be taught. And we had excellent NCOs, and they took care of us, and they made sure we knew what we were doing. They certainly didn't make it easy. They made us accountable. But a lot of days on the range, a lot of pepper potting through the fields of Wainwright, a lot of pulling toboggans full of stuff, a lot of setting up tents. But all in all, a really positive experience. And I think one thing about the military is it makes you, I don't know if it makes you a better person, but it makes you more appreciative of the things you have. Like I said, if you've never been cold, you don't appreciate how warm you are. If you've never been hungry, you don't appreciate walking into the grocery store and having just food available.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never been really, really tired, you don't really appreciate your bed the same way. I appreciate everything way more these days, just based on that one experience.
I honestly think it makes people a much better person to go through experiences like that. There might even be something to be said to have people do some sort of service, whether military or whatever it might be, but have them do some service right after high school to actually appreciate the things they have and be thankful for the people who came before them and made all these sacrifices. Because nowadays it's more about people are screaming about their rights rather than their obligations or responsibilities. So it's kind of you want to say the world's almost like flipped around, and people are looking at things from not such a great perspective, maybe even a more dangerous perspective. I don't know if we're at a good place, like, in the world when people aren't really, they're just not thankful, right? Or they say they are, but they don't truly get it. And again, yeah, you're talking about living in the bush and being cold, and both of us deal with homeless people almost on a daily basis, and you see what they go through, and it's like, as police or fire, we could probably relate to them even more, having gone through a lot of the different training or other things we've experienced, more so than a lot of the social justice people that are out there saying they're on their side. But it's like, you've never experienced anything like that. Some of them, granted, might have been homeless or had addiction issues previously, and then they work with these people after they've been able to overcome some of their stuff. But I think the people who are most able to relate, probably going to be a lot of military guys who jump to the police or to the fire and work with people in their own community.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I can't, like I said, I had a good life that went, I have a good life. I have a very good life. And it started being a kid where, my parents took care of me and made sure I had everything I need. It's difficult to try to relate what that community is going through. And some days you just can't believe what you're seeing. But I do find it interesting that there's a lot of folks out there who pay a lot of money to go through programs that are run by retired military guys that, they put them through a little bit of hardship. And, there used to be the basic training fitness courses, and you'd see them pushing a truck up a hill or something. They just take these team building exercises from the military and incorporate them in a civilian context and run really successful businesses. And I think it's awesome that people are willing to put themselves out there and do that. Maybe maybe more of us need to try to push a few trucks up Gerson Hill or something.
Or you become like Bear Grylls and you make millions of dollars on TV just making people go through crazy drills or eating bugs.
Yeah, if you're eating bugs, you've failed to plan. You're really in trouble at that point if you're eating bugs and drinking some of the things he drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, try to plan better. Don't run out of water so fast.
Yeah. So kind of back on the basic training, can you tell us how does the basic training here compare to maybe some of the other militaries in the world?
Oh, geez. I would think I would think it's similar. I mean, there's pretty much a NATO standard or kind of like Western military standard on how most training occurs. I mean, it's not an art. It's a science. You don't just like guess at how to create soldiers. That's a proven process that you need to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have to be similar. I really didn't see much of other militaries until that first trip overseas. I'm old enough for the Bosnia days where we had Dutch soldiers that stayed with us. We worked with American soldiers, and that was really my first exposure to other countries. But I would guess it's very similar. I know once I got to CANSOF and we spent more time with our allies. Everything's pretty close to the same. However, you've got like you can't compare the Canadian military to the American military. We have challenges that just don't even exist for them. Like when you talk about lift capabilities, helicopters, it's a totally different mission when you're a Canadian versus an American. And to our allies' credit, they help us out and we help them out where we can too. It really is a team, but every mission is different for every nation. It just it depends on the assets you have, but once you get to the individual soldier, it's pretty similar, whether it's a Swedish guy or a Swedish girl or from Britain or Holland. It's pretty standard.
Yeah, I'd say it's the same for police. You got similar or the same training. We're not at necessarily nationalized standards, but everybody kind of follows very similar rules and playbook. But then it comes down to funding. As for what you do after you're out of the basic training, what units are available to you. So, the Americans will spend a lot more in their military, so there might be more things to do and more equipment. But yeah, it's not to say anybody's less valuable than the other. It's just you make do with what you got and help out where you can, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, I guess too. I mentioned a lot of our allied countries. They're like NATO countries, but training and working with Afghani soldiers or Iraqi soldiers, they're the same too. It was funny. You could just sit down, not being able to speak the language, with an Iraqi soldier, sit there and enjoy a coffee or a tea. You don't need to say a word. You're just two people going through the same situation, and you're glad for each other's company.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily need to communicate. I always found that to be very interesting. You could just sit in a circle with these gentlemen, and I will get to it, but becoming a medic, I was always very thankful just to go see our allies and just offer them like, hey, how's everybody doing? And just hand out a few Tylenols, maybe take care of a few blisters. It was always a nice way to give back to them. They really, bore the brunt of a lot of our conflicts, and it was nice to be able to just do those small gestures for them.
So where do you go from you come back here, and then where's your career kind of go? What's the path?
Yeah, my course was posted to the 1st Battalion, PPCLI at the garrison here. And like I said, the Edmonton garrison's fantastic. It was a great place to work. But I was very, very young. So we went to Bosnia, which was interesting. I always felt super, not bad, but I was grateful to have had a low intensity first deployment, whereas some dudes went, early, like that 2002, 2006 Afghanistan, like that's high intensity stuff. You're going right into it. So we went to Bosnia, and while I was in training, you had 9/11, and then while we were deployed to Bosnia, you also had the invasion of Iraq. And as my career kind of progressed, when you're 20 years old, did you ever notice that a year goes by a lot slower than when you're 40?
Yeah.
So it just kind of seemed like Canada was not necessarily going to get into these conflicts not the way I wanted. I don't know what the right word is, but it just seemed like Canada wasn't going to be participating at a high level in these conflicts. Now, obviously, in hindsight, we know what happened. Like everything changed. We end up very heavily engaged in Afghanistan, but So I just kind of was like, well, I don't know if this is quite for me. You know, I grew up wanting to be a soldier, and then I kind of started questioning if that was a career I wanted. And we had we always had medics attached with us, and I was really interested in what they were doing. And then I also had my first introduction to what like TCCC or Tactical Combat Casualty Care when I was in the infantry, and I was like, you know, I'd love to be a paramedic. I'd love to go see what happens on the ambulance. And the military covered my costs for school, and then I switched from the Reg Force to the militia, and I started working for the Big Stone Cree Nation out of Wabasca up north there, and Peerless Lake and Trout Lake.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my next step, was as a primary care paramedic uh, for Big Stone Cree Nation.
Okay. So when you get into that, that sounds actually pretty good that they covered the cost for it,
Mhm.
and you know they want their people to grow. And then if you're still in the militia, you come back, and now they've got somebody who's well equipped, well trained. Sounds like a good benefit for the military. So what was it like working as a medic?
Well, working the Big Stone Cree Nation took great care of us. We had, you know, we had a good place to stay. We had good ambulances. We had all the equipment we needed. You know, there's a lot of stories from the early 2000s with like private ambulance services where those paramedics didn't have what they need. We never faced that, but it was very interesting. We were all very young, and it's a very isolated place,
Mm-hmm.
and helps a long ways away sometimes when you're in these remote communities. But I learned a ton because it's you, it's your partner, maybe, you know, an RCMP officer that's 40 kilometers away, and then you're living right in the community. So it was an awesome experience. I learned a lot. A tough day working, you know, on the Big Stone Cree Nation was sometimes harder than a tough day in Afghanistan and Iraq. You're a long, long ways from help.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a very limited scope of practice for treatment. So when you had those big calls, you know, somebody with a head injury or delivering babies, which is still to this day one of the most stressful things I think you can do in pre-hospital care. You're just two 21-year-old PCPs barreling down a gravel road in January trying to meet up with an airplane. And if you're lucky, maybe a cop can meet you halfway and drive the ambulance. So it was just, you were on your own. You had to be smart. You had to think quick, and you know, you had to do your job.
I think that's interesting. You're mentioning that. Makes me think of back to being in Okotoks doing the RCMP stuff. And that was a bigger center, not isolated by any means. But I mean, there's days where, yeah, there's only two of you working, even in a big place like that. There could be two or three of you on, and one of you's at a call at one end of your geographic region, and the other one, our region, was about an hour from end to end. And that was one of the smaller ones in Alberta, if not the smallest. And yeah, there's days where I'd be at a call by myself, and I'm 24 when I got in. And it's like, here you are. And, you know, people look to you as the authority figure, and, you know, they're like, where do I go? What do I do? And how do I do it? And you're 24 and you're directing people who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And you're thinking, man, I was hoping you had more experience with this than I did. But yeah, driving ambulances and doing other things, it's kind of just got to make things happen. So.
Yeah. Well, we relied heavily on the RCMP to help us out with transporting sometimes, where you really needed two sets of hands in the back. And, you know, if you were lucky, they would get to you in about 20 if they were able to meet you halfway.
Yeah. So your first deployment was before the medic stuff?
Yeah. I went to Bosnia with the 1st Battalion.
So can you kind of talk about how that was, what your experience over there was like?
Yeah, but well, you know, lots of folks went to Bosnia. We certainly showed up there on the tail end of the mission as well. You know, you look at 1994 trips to the former Yugoslavia, and you've got your you know, your Sarajevo situations, your you know, your incidents with the running into like the Croatian and Serbian militaries. Ours was very calm. You know, for the most part, we delivered a lot of clothes and food, and we helped out with a lot of like civil military affairs. So we had an officer that was, you know, he was out there just helping, spending money in the community. So driving him around was something that we did a lot. But it was a lot of fun. It was my first time outside of Canada, and you get a couple of leaves. You know, you get two 96-hour passes and then a 3-week pass. So I got to kind of cruise around Europe a little bit and check things out. So it was a lot of fun as a young kid. But the tour itself, to be honest, was, you know, you rotated from patrolling to watching the gate to quick reaction force. That was your life 1 week at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, again, the Canadian taxpayers, they took care of us. We had a pool table, we had ping pong, we had healthy food, we were warm at night. But other than that, it was an uneventful.
I
Yeah.
imagine they try to make it as much as home like as possible.
Yeah, you get used, like in the military, you get really good at making home where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Home can be a trench, home can be a tent, home can be an old bread factory, just like in Bosnia. But it's kind of the people you're with. You just hope there's enough stuff to keep you busy.
Yeah.
It's super interesting with that though, because 20 years ago we were playing board games. We'd have Axis and Allies going set up in someone's room for, 3 nights at a time. There was 2 computers for a camp of, well, no, there might have been 4. Sorry, to send emails.
Mm-hmm.
There was just less to do. Now when you deploy, it's like, there better be internet, or everybody loses their mind. But,
Yeah.
it was just a little different.
So are you guys mostly on, would you call it like humanitarian missions? Is it more supporting and just helping rather than necessarily fighting people?
Yeah, there was certainly no fighting. We had like some crowds and things like that, but there was no fighting on those deployments. Now, obviously, the guys in the early to mid 90s, totally different tours.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it was none of that. We were just trying to engage with the community as much as possible, help distribute, like I said, food and clothes, and rebuild some of these communities.
Okay. So you come back, you do the education portion.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're a medic. We would call you a medic. I don't know all the terms, so I don't want to get them all mixed up, but I'll say medic for simplicity.
Yeah, it's pretty, that term works. Yeah. It works throughout.
So where do you kind of go from there? Because you then go back to the Reg Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once Canada kind of committed to that, they started moving from Kabul down into Kandahar, I think in 2005. And then the 1st Battalion was deployed in 2006, so I knew a ton of those guys. And, I had been talking to them through their workup training and as they prepared. And from what they were telling me, like, Canada was going to, take our place and get involved in this thing. So I immediately put my transfer back into the Reg Force.
Okay. So you were ready to get after it.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to miss this. I wanted to be part of that.
I think a lot of this stuff, when you listen to other podcasts, especially ones that are other military guys run, most famous one probably Jocko, but a lot of them sign up and they, it's your younger guys and you're just raring to go and you want to get into the shit in there, right? And you have maybe it's all the movies you watch and cartoons and everything as you're growing up, but you have an idea of how things or an image of how things kind of work. Same with police. When we get in, it's like I watched all Lethal Weapons and Die Hards and think you're diving out of buildings and running around just being crazy. But then you get in and you see it's 99% paperwork. So a military 99% humanitarian stuff. It's not, there's a lot of options that come before fighting with somebody, whether it's in another country or it's on the street here. There's a million ways to talk to somebody, de-escalate things. So I think that part gets lost on the general public when the media puts a lot of things out about uses of force. It's like the use of force for the number of interactions that police have with people, and imagine it'd be the same with the military. There are millions of interactions a year, and less than 1% end up in a use of force. And even when we say use of force, there's very minor uses of force compared to getting into an actual shooting event. So, but yeah, when you get back into it, so tell me kind of what's that like? You get back into the Reg Force, and then what?
Yeah, I had to catch up on some training, and then I got posted to one field ambulance here in Edmonton, and I was lucky enough to pretty quickly get put on the task force that left from Edmonton in 2008. And it's interesting. You talked about the misconception of what police officers like. They show the exciting stuff, but then in reality, there's a lot of the boring stuff. The military is the same way. There's a lot of just being really, really bored.
Mm-hmm.
But in between that is like sheer moments of terror. And I think if you talk to most Army guys, and I don't like to speak for other veterans because I think there's too many people that do that. They don't there's always like, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think there's too many people that speak for how veterans should or do feel, but I can tell you right away, that kind of stuff is exciting till someone on your side takes damage. Then
Hmm.
all of a sudden it becomes very, very real, and it's not as exciting as you want it to be. It's actually the opposite. But I always look at it this way. The world can be like a bad, scary place. Sometimes the city of Edmonton can be a bad, scary place, and things are going to go wrong. And I just want to be part of the solution to fix it.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm equipped, I'm well trained to help deal with these kind of problems. But that wanting to get after it, like I said, it goes away real fast when somebody on your side is hurt.
Well, it's all fun and games till somebody's hurt.
Yeah. So that was, the big eye opener for I think a lot of us. And like I said, I was at this point a little bit older, um, but that goes away quickly. And to your point about the when things go wrong, that to me is such an interesting concept because yeah, you can have 99.9% of whatever those interactions may be, whether it's soldiers or police or even firefighters or paramedics. y- It's our job to make sure that 0.1% doesn't happen. That's part of being accountable.
Hmm.
And I think that's what the taxpayers are always looking for from, their public servants is, are we always trying our best to make sure that we don't let things go wrong and just call it doing business? We
Hmm.
we are accountable for what we do. They pay us with their taxes, and they expect a high level of service. And I'm a big believer in that. If you're a police officer, a firefighter, a soldier, you know, you you do owe the public your best. And I understand that sometimes it gets tough, but we do have to make sure that we are accountable to them.
So, based on what you're saying, I'm guessing there's a few times where you've taken had to deal with some casualties while you're deployed.
Yeah, I think again, I don't want to speak for other people from the military, but even if you're not out out in the field, they used to call it like outside the wire, and it was a term I didn't really like because it created a differentiation between the folks that were in the field and the folks that were supporting us back at like Kandahar Airfield or within the forward operating bases. A lot of those people had to stay up late at night and send off casualties from all kinds of nations. And so I think everybody that deploys deals with casualties in some fashion.
Hmm.
Yeah, whether you're out in the field treating them or whether you're saying goodbye to them on the tarmac.
There was a pretty interesting podcast. I'd have to look up, try and find it again. There was one where the interviewee was a guy who worked essentially in the morgue for the military, and most people have like a medic or somebody on, and they got this guy on who's like the last person to see the bodies before they go back overseas, and he was talking about some of that and just the things he's seen, and then a lot of the mental state of the of where he is when he's in that work. And yeah, I couldn't imagine like some of that. Well, you're there alone or you're there with a few people, but you're not talking to the other people in front of you, and just a lot of time to think, a lot of time to kind of get into your own head and dwell on things. And yeah, sometimes it could be kind of scary, especially like some people could have some pretty bad thoughts, but it's just, yeah, it gets you really thinking about all these people and who's back home waiting for them.
Yeah,
So,
that's important. That kind of goes back to my point about being in the field or being at the base. You don't know what other people have been through, and frankly, everybody's been through some shit.
mhm.
So it doesn't do anyone any good to make judgments.
So what is when you deploy as a medic? What are some of those? Can you talk about some of the missions or some of the things that you were on, and how those kind of play out and what it looks like?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of start with Afghanistan. My first trip to Afghanistan was really interesting. I was part of what's called like a Role 1 medical facility. So that's like your primary care. It's like going to the doctor's office here. You got the big hospital, and then you got the doctor's office. So we
Hmm.
did with like the bumps and bruises, the ingrown toenails and the sore feet, while the big hospital handled all the incoming casualties. But I was just glad to be there. Helping a guy get new screws for his glasses is important,
Hmm.
and I like to be the guy that helped order that. But what came with that task also was that I backfilled for medics that if somebody got injured or if somebody went on holidays, I would backfill their positions within the battle group, which was, that group of people that were outside the wire. So I had an opportunity to work with just tons of different, infantry units, armored units. I worked with the French armored unit. I think it's 12 RBC. 2 guys spoke English in the whole unit, and I got to spend 2 weeks with them. But like I said, with the the Iraqis and the Afghani soldiers, I didn't need to talk to those guys. I just needed to be there and be a good teammate. And if someone was sick, we just bring over someone to help with the conversation. We get them sorted out. But I got to work with all kinds of subunits, and then I got to see the entire area of operations in Kandahar, which was amazing. And the biggest thing I learned from this deployment was how to be a good enabler. I had 3 weeks, or these stints of 3 weeks with different units, and I had a few days to fit in. I hung out with them for 3 more weeks, and then I went to a new one where I had to start all over again, where no one knew me. So what I learned on that trip was how to be a good enabler. How to fit in quickly with the team, how to gain trust, and that was something that always stuck with me.
Yeah. Well, and did you end up outside, like going out in the field and
absolutely
pulling out there?
Yeah, absolutely. That was your Zari Panjway years. I mean, there was a lot of Zari Panjway years, but yeah, absolutely. You spent time.
Is that a specific area?
Yeah, Zari Panjway. Geez, trying to describe it. There's gonna be guys that are gonna be furious if I don't get this right. I'll be careful here. But Zari Panjway was kind of the hotspot for the Canadian battle group. It was along we had a whole bunch of these outposts just into the district, and they were just constantly. There was just constantly things going on, and trying to secure the road and move stuff and support the A&A in their operations. And I'll never forget some of the long walks that we had from Spurwingar, which was one of our operating bases, out to what was it called? I think Mouchon. Just these long walks in the middle of the night with hundreds of people strung out over hundreds of meters. And then the same thing with vehicles, these long 7, 8, 9 kilometer long vehicles just cruising up and down the riverbed trying to get supplies in and out and whatnot.
Is this all like the hundreds of people you're walking with? Is this all soldiers, or is this like you're moving civilians?
No. There are some civilians once in a while. A friend of mine, Catherine O'Neill, she's a reporter. She was with us on one of these long walks, and but for the most part, it's just soldiers, moving from place to place.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really hard, to be honest, Nathan. Like, to think back that long, that's 14 years ago, to think like what we were doing on. I mean, the idea was to try to gain control of territory and kind of
push the
Taliban out and then try to rebuild. But it felt like we never gained a lot of ground sometimes.
Yeah.
We would go out during the day, we'd leave at night, and they'd be right back there.
Yeah. Or is essentially displacing a problem, right? If they're not in the one area to the left, then they're moving over to the right, and then you go to the right, they go back to the left.
It felt like that sometimes. Absolutely. Yeah. But then every once in a while they would choose to fight, and then that's when you'd get into your kind of your combat operations, or if you could plan some deliberate operations. There were deliberate operations, like we're going to start here and we're going to go here, and we're going to control this ground from here to here, and then we're going to hold it.
Was there any can you talk about any experiences you had where you might have been right in the combat and you're either involved directly in the combat or you're doing your casualty care?
Yeah. So my first tour, I guess the thing with medics too is you have to keep in mind I'm not set up to necessarily fight. There's other guys who get paid to do that. My job is to make sure that I stay close to the sergeant major or the warrant. I'm his fire team partner, and depending on how you're set up, the last thing the medic should be doing is trying to run into the gunfight. Yeah, you might start setting up like, okay, if we have casualties, we'll put them here. But for the most part, you're just staying in the warrant's hip pocket, being close to him, and you're on call for what he needs you to do, and that's medicine. Okay. That was always the big thing that trying to teach and mentor young medics was like, you are a medic, be really good at medicine. So it was never my job to, if you have to be engaged, like, do you fire your weapon? Yes. But that's not your primary job. You're not going to get in the line and start laying down heavy fire. You're going to get to the warrant. You're going to make sure you're close to him.
So what's it like being in combat and trying to do medicine on people?
Well, like I said, I didn't have to treat any combat casualties like Canadians on this tour. We treated a few people, like Afghanis, host nation people, uh, during other incidents, but that trip I never treated a Canadian soldier. So
Okay.
what was it, what's combat like? I mean, I think it differs for everybody. It depends on the action too. Like IEDs are certainly scarier than small arms fire.
Mm-hmm.
Mortars are certainly scarier than small arms fire, but I guess it depends on what's happening, and what kind of firepower you have too. If you got heavy firepower close by, it's usually ends pretty quick or comes to a conclusion pretty quick. But it's such a variable; it's almost impossible to describe.
So when we'll move into like some of your other deployments, maybe talk about a bit about the CANSOF side of things. Can you talk about even just the start of it? So what does that look like when you're trying to apply and go through the training, and how's that look?
Yeah. So I did have one other deployment to Afghanistan between my time in the brigade when I moved to CANSOF. But yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is there is not a better feeling in the world than like really making a difference and helping someone. I worked last night, and I'll draw a quick fire story here. But last night, we're on one of the big ladder trucks making our way back to Station 1, and we get flagged down on 106th Ave there, and somebody's like, "Hey, this guy needs help," and we jumped out, and this gentleman had overdosed, and he was very sick. He's blue in the face. His vitals are very, they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to intervene and help, and I think we saved that guy's life. It's a great feeling. It's the exact same thing in combat. It's
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a Canadian or an Afghan or an Iraqi, there is a very good feeling when you know that you made a difference in whether this person lives or dies.
Yeah. I've few and far between had those experiences on the police side of things. There's been a couple times where a doctor said, like, if you didn't do this or you weren't there at this time, this person be dead. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool experience to have that happen and see the results of your training, especially. So, but yeah, talk to us about like what it's like going through the training for CANSOF.
Yeah, CANSOF was just it was the best experience of my life. Professionally, there's your home life, and then your professional life, and being a member of CANSOF was just like an absolute privilege. It's the best people in the country. It's an amazing organization. It's just it's indescribable how much of a privilege it was to be there. Now that said, being an Edmonton firefighter is an amazing privilege as well. This city takes care of us. We have everything we need. Our trucks are good. Our gear is good. We're well taken care of. But there's just this professional satisfaction that comes along with a job like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to CANSOF, I had that second deployment to Afghanistan, and I came home and I had a very young family. And it's interesting because I hear a lot of police and firefighters sometimes say, like, well, I'm not getting rich being a police officer or a firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you where you're really not getting rich, and that's being a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very few ways to, there's no overtime. Like if you're at work, you're just at work. There's, the only time you get a pay bump is if you get promoted. And some of those promotions come with all these new responsibilities and about 40 extra bucks a month. However, one of the big ways that you can kind of bump your pay is to be in CANSOF. There's allowances there. And I thought, oh geez, we could really use that. And then I had some friends that were out in CANSOF, and they're like, man, this is the army you thought you were joining. So I put my application in. It took about 11 months. I went out there. I had I went through the selection process, and just to make sure everybody understands, I was not an operator. I was a medic.
Mm.
There's a huge difference in the selection process, and there's a huge difference in the job description. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. But yeah, I got there, and I'll never forget the day I got issued my gear, and I was like, this is like, it's like Christmas. I didn't even know what I was getting. They just gave me bags of stuff that it took me years to figure out how to use them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. But so that was one of the driving reasons. But there was also the availability of missions. Like CANSOF is always working. And like I said, I knew there was things going on in the world, and I wanted to be a part of it. And CANSOF is there.
Well, so what is the training like? Is it just that much more intense? Is it timed events and
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean the pathway that people take to being a special operations med tech is varied because it's a super new. Well, it's not super new, but it's a newer concept within that command where they're trying to figure out a consistent way to vet and then train your close specialists. And your medics are really, they are medical specialists. That's what they're there for. However, you have to make sure that, guys have the fitness, the tactical acumen, um, the insertion and extraction capabilities. So the training kind of for me kicked off with a trip out to Ottawa, and I took my medic course out there. And yeah, there's a lot of attribute stands and stuff like that. And one thing I learned really, really quick, and I carry it with me to this day, is I'd rather work with the guy who doesn't have the best skills and a great attitude than the guy with the best skills and a shitty attitude.
yeah.
So a lot of team building stuff, early mornings, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of problems to solve, a lot of failure. And that was one of the biggest lessons I learned when I got to CANSOF. I never made it to the NHL or to Major League Baseball, but I never considered those a failure.
Yeah.
However, I had never failed a task in the military. Like, I had never failed at anything. And the first time I failed, it was one of the most important lessons of my life. Because I didn't just fail, I failed miserably.
Yeah.
And I think learning to fail is another thing that the Army helps teach you. If you've never failed, sometimes you won't put yourself out there. So learning to fail was key.
Well, you can't be afraid to fail, right? Otherwise, you never take any risks. You never learn things. A lot of good things come out of failing, especially when you're doing it in a training environment. That's where you want to fail. I guess it's better there and get your practice in than in the real thing. So, yeah, I know you talked about going on a couple deployments with CANSOF and a few of the smaller missions. So, what kind of missions or what do those deployments look like?
Yeah, a lot of training, trying to help out host nation forces get themselves, prepared for what was to come. So, my first trip mostly involved training. It was interesting because we try to set up medical training, and these poor guys, like, these folks, these Kurds, they were spending all night on the line. And I'll just throw some context out there too for everybody. I mentioned earlier about being in the military. I think it helps make you appreciate things more. Once you see what some of these other folks are going through, you just appreciate being a Canadian that much more. Like how good this country is. I know we have our blemishes. I know we have some problems, but at the end of the day, this is a good place to live. So just imagine you're, a plumber in Edmonton. 10 days a month, you're expected to head to the front lines, and you're going to stare across a no man's land at ISIS. And every once in a while, they're going to shoot at you. You've got like 10 rounds in your machine gun, so you might shoot back. But 10 days a month, you're going to go do that. So you're going to be up there 24 hours a day for 10 days, 10 days of the month. Or, you might volunteer to drive an ambulance. You're going to participate in the war effort somehow. We were offering training to these folks, and they would be up all night, and they would still come down from their positions to participate in training. Now, they loved to shoot, and they loved the mortars, and they loved the long-range shooting. But nobody wanted to train medical. So we had a couple medical days set up, and I got a funny picture. I got my classroom all set up. Tourniquets are out, whiteboard's ready to go, linguist is there, and nobody showed up. So we had to find a way to make medical training more fun. And then we just turned it into background activity for the shooting days, half the guys on the line and half the guys learning to use tourniquets. So that was the best way to get that stuff in.
They're watching the same movies over there that we were growing up. They got the same impression of the military.
Yeah, lots of boring days. But yeah, these folks just still came down off the mountain every day. You had nursing students and pharmaceutical students working in these clinics. We would obviously supplement those. I made sure that I went and helped with sick parade. Just a couple hours in the morning, go help. With those bumps and bruises, and then we did a lot of training. That was kind of my first trip. Now the second trip was certainly a little bit different because we were, there were a ton of host nation casualties, and we were part of, treating them and evacing them back to like that higher level of care. And this is where, I learned a lot of things in CANSOF. I learned how to lead. I learned how to follow. I learned how to train, and I also learned really, really good medicine. And it was I remember the day when, I kind of wrapped up my medic course, and I was like, I can't believe I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was a huge eye opener. But when you start really treating these bad battlefield casualties, not just in ones and twos, but in dozens and hundreds,
Hmm.
it was quite the experience.
Were you out in like at the front line when you're treating a lot of these people, or are you back at a base and they're coming in and
Yeah, you're in a safe space.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to do good medicine uh, that far forward.
Yeah.
So the host nation folks took care of the very, very far forward stuff, but we were their first stop on the way back to what would be called like tertiary care or that end level care. So
So
we just made sure that we had all the bleeding controlled, a good airway in place, make sure that the chest is intact, drugs are in place, hypothermia is taken care of, and then we fired them into an ambulance driven by a volunteer back to the hospital.
wow, lots of stuff going on.
Absolutely.
So from CANSOF after that, what makes you kind of think, okay, I'm done with the military side of things. Now I want to kind of transition into something else in life. So what's that journey like?
Yeah, if I could too, and again, this is one of those things I don't want to, like I said off the top, I want to be candid, but I also don't want to make people mad. But when we talk about like service, there are different levels, and the commitment that we ask of soldiers is kind of beyond a lot of people. And I hate to say that, beyond even what a lot of like fire, EMS, and police go through, because like I said, there's no overtime, there's no union taking care of you. You just do what you're told, and you carry on with the mission. And there was a point where I had young kids, and I was away from home of like 270 days a year.
Hmm.
So there was this point in time where my kids, do you tell them you're going to leave in the morning and wreck their sleep, or do you just be gone in the morning and lose their trust?
Hmm.
When your kids start to recognize luggage as a negative thing, it's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And well, I shouldn't say that, because I did it. Like, I volunteered for it, but it just got to be a lot. And me and my wife are both very, very proud Albertans. We love it here. Like, Edmonton is home. I've been all over the world, and Edmonton's one of the best places in it. It was time for us to make our way home. The hard thing is I really didn't want to go from, the special forces back to a brigade. And I don't mean any disrespect to the brigade. It was just a transition I didn't want to make. And so I thought, well, I'm still young enough. I want to chase that dragon of excitement. What kind of job can I do where I get the teamwork? I can pay the bills,
Mhm.
and I get to be excited. And fire just kind of stood out. I had tried to be a cop in like 2012, and nobody wanted me. But it just made sense. So I started the process while I was in Ottawa, and we came back here. I worked at one field am for a year, and then it was on to the fire department.
Okay. And I'm guessing that's a pretty natural transition. I mean, you got a lot of the medic training. Now you're going to be learning about fighting fires. So maybe you have a portion of that job kind of covered off. What does the training look like for fire when you go through?
Yeah, my training was fantastic. The guys that conducted it, the adjuncts were amazing. Even you'd think with this crazy medical background, you just coast through the advanced first aid portion, which it really was. But boy, did I learn a lot. Just good, simple things about how to be a good pre-hospital guy. And you mentioned natural transition. Fighting a fire it's just battle procedure. You got a bunch of people with designated tasks working together to complete an objective.
Mhm.
Whether you're on the hose or you're on the fan or you're cutting holes in the roof, everybody has a specific mission to obtain the strategic goal, which is putting that fire out. And it was amazing. I couldn't believe how similar it was to a military operation. But again, the fire department is a paramilitary structure, so
Mhm.
yeah, it was supernatural. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize too how uh, the military has the budget and the curriculum designers, and the Mounties had this certainly as well. they come up with a lot of the things that we use in daily life. A lot of organizations, police, fire, they're all based off of those structures, and a lot of the tools we use, a lot of the technology. That's a huge one. A lot of that stuff comes out of wars of the past, like World War I and II, created a ton of inventions. But yeah, I don't think people realize that a lot of the stuff comes from the military, actually.
Yeah, I think the even the incident command system is based off of like a military structure,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly. I hope I'm not misspeaking there, but yeah, ICS is based off of a military concept.
Yeah, yeah. So once you're in fire, you're going through the training. How long is training for that?
Oh, geez.
Is it like 6 months, like police?
No, it's a little shorter. I think it's 14 weeks. And again, I'm sorry if I get that number wrong, but I believe it's 14 weeks. You've got you got your intro week. There's a class in right now. They did their kind of intro week into medical training, into fire training, and then they kind of have their wrap up grad week. But I think it's about 14 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been on with fire now?
I'm into my 5th year.
5th year.
Yeah.
And what's it been like working with fire?
Oh, it's an awesome job.
Mhm.
Like I said, the city takes great care of us. We have good trucks. Our infrastructure is good. I mean, sometimes our biggest thing we were I worked the last few days here. I worked last night, like I mentioned, but our air conditioner was working, and we all kind of laughed about how, boy, we've got it good when our biggest problem is that our air conditioner is not working.
Yeah.
And then of course the city came and fixed it, which I really appreciate. But no, it's a great job. The city takes care of us. We have we have good programs to keep our gear clean. The trucks are nice. Uh, I think recruitment is good. They're hiring the right people. But yeah, it's a great job. And then I go back to that time away from home. I get to see my children way more.
Hmm.
Now the funny thing with that, and there's a lot of Army guys that can relate with this, that once they leave, me and my wife we're still learning how to live together. When you do 10 straight years, 12 straight years of being away from home that much, and now you're going to be home every day,
Hmm.
it's kind of funny. We, sometimes I feel like she looks at me and says, "Man, you got to take a trip."
Yeah. Because you're on top of each other now, and you're
Yeah.
in each other's space, and it's
Yeah.
like, and we're just humans. Some people like their alone time, and yeah, it's kind of managing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things too, when you're away that often, you get home. Say you get home on a Friday night, you wake up Saturday, and you want to take everybody to the pool,
Mhm.
and you have these expectations that aren't realistic because now these kids are exhausted because they knew you were coming home, and you just want to parachute back in after being away for 90 days and go to the pool. It just doesn't work that way, and that kind of goes back to that level of service I talked about that our soldiers go through, and I think it's important to stay empathetic to that. And then I've the guys that I work with, I get teased a lot, because I can barely make it past 7:30 in the morning without telling an Army story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, Steve, we know you're in the Army, but I just want those guys to appreciate what they have, and being an Edmonton firefighter is a job that should be appreciated.
And maybe backtracking a bit, when you leave the military, is there any sort of course or program that helps you kind of re-civilianize? Because you see again, you might see it in movies, but you hear about it on podcasts, and there's a lot of people who have trouble transitioning back to civilian life, whether it's PTSD or they are, they just lack that daily structure, which is a lot of people like. It's like, I know I'm doing this, this, and this today at these times, and that really keeps you focused. And now all of a sudden that's just gone. So, is there any kind of program that moves you through back to
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, Veterans Affairs and the Canadian military. I don't want to say that they take good care of everybody, because there's a lot of guys, a lot of veterans, a lot of retired soldiers who feel like they haven't been taken care of, and I understand where they're coming from. But there are absolutely programs. For me, having the time that I served, I think it's about $60,000 worth of secondary education that I'm entitled to. With that, I mean, even just there's $5,000 for personal development. So I took like a World War II history course. I took a gunsmithing course,
Hmm.
and Veterans Affairs covers all these things. I didn't need to access any of those services. I was very, very lucky to come out of my service like very, very healthy, like physically and mentally.
Mhm.
But yes, there are those those not checks, but programs in place. But do they always work out for our veterans? No. For some of them, though, yeah, I think it does work.
Yeah. Well, and I guess using the word check kind of makes me think like, do they check in on people, or is there some sort of
Yeah, that's again a tough conversation to have because I had a gentleman come up to the other day. He told me his brother's really struggling, and it almost seems like the organization that's trying to help you tries to hurt you at the same time, and it doesn't make any sense.
hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's really a case by case. It's such a complicated, difficult topic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting here telling you I'm good. Wouldn't take long to find a guy where you could say, no, I'm not good, and I need help.
Well, actually, and tomorrow, one of the recordings I'm doing is with a professor from the University of Regina, and he did a study on PTSD with the RCMP. And he talks a little bit about, and we're going to get into it tomorrow, so I don't have a whole lot of the info today. He's the expert, but just how a lot of the mental health programs that are given by all these various organizations, no matter where, private or government organizations, they're not actually evidence based, and they're not necessarily actually doing the things they are selling you on. So I thought that was very interesting. So that might be something worth listening to, and when we kind of get into it, because it's not to say that a lot of these programs are gimmicks or just trying to sell you something. They're just trying to make money, but it's like what's actually evidence based and what's really going to work, and how do we measure? That's a big thing too that he's going to get into, is like how we measure these things and whether they're helping people, or maybe they're hurting people. You never know. Could be on the other side of things. So, but yeah, now so we're back with you in being in fire, and can you kind of talk about some of your experiences with being with the fire department and just what it's like day to day?
Day to day, I'm downtown. I've been downtown for over 3 years, so we're busy. And I mean, you've got Edmonton's a big city. There's a lot of different places, so you've got the way that a fire hall in the Southwest operates is going to be much different than downtown. I think last year between our 3 trucks, we did like 11,000 calls.
Oh,
So we're bumping. We're always moving. Like I said, we're in that downtown core, so it's busy, but I enjoy that. We're certainly right at the front of the opioid issue and the homeless issue, and then we've also got the fires that are constantly being started in
mhm.
the neighborhood around the stadium. So we're right in the mix of those 2 things that I think are pretty prevalent in the news. I think a lot of it's scary when you go to these fires and you then read the story the next day and you see the interview with the person you saw that night, like their garage got lit on fire,
Mhm.
and you thankfully, unfortunately, they lose their garage and they lose tons of their property, but maybe their house didn't burn, and they're thankful for that. But then you read their comments in the news the next day, and they're scared to sleep because somebody's lighting these fires. But it is nice to help people. Like I said, bad things are going to happen. I don't want them to happen, but when they do, I feel like I'm one of the people that can help out when we're there. So day to day, I mean, we still do the trips to the grocery store. We're lucky we get to eat well, but when the tones go, you're expected to be ready.
Well, and we had a conversation before about you said there's 3 types of trucks.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
there's
how does the schedule kind of work? Because you were talking about how you guys move between trucks and you're not always on the same one.
Mhm.
So what can you explain that for people?
Yeah. With Station One, we have there's lots of different types of trucks, but the big ones that stand out is we've got the pumps, and they're the ones that have the hoses in the water. They go to everything. They're also the trucks that get dispatched to medical aids for the most part. Uh, then at Station One, we have a second pump. So one day those pumps take turns bearing the brunt of the calls, and then mixed in at Station One, our third truck is a ladder, which is obviously the one with the big ladder on top.
Mhm.
Those trucks are they're more specialized for fire stuff, so they don't do a lot of medical aids. Like I mentioned last night, if you get flagged down, we do have the gear and the capability to help out with a medical call. So the pumps are very busy.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned, we did I think it was 11,600 calls out of Station One. The 2 pumps did 5,000 each. The ladder did 1,600.
Oh, really?
So
Wow.
what it means is your days are just a little bit quieter on the ladder. Lots of walking around buildings looking for pulled fire alarms or why is water flowing. Lots of recon.
How do you switch between them? Is it a schedule?
Yeah, it depends on qualifications. Obviously, if you can't drive the ladder, you don't drive the ladder. If you can't drive the pump, you don't drive the pump. So
Hmm.
it's basically, well, at the end of the day, operational needs will dictate who sits where. But for the most part, I have the officers in Edmonton Fire are amazing. Like and especially the leadership that I've had at Station One from the time I've been there. Well, since I've been in the fire department, has been excellent. They take care of us. They make sure we get our time on that quieter truck because it's also exciting.
Hmm.
I'll do medical aids all day, but I still enjoy going up in that bucket and helping put out fires.
So maybe clear up a myth, or whether it is a myth or not. But so is there still like running into fires? Does that still happen? If a building's on fire, are you actually gonna like running into the building, or what does fighting a fire entail?
Jeez, yeah, this again too. This is going to be one of those ones. If any of the guys are listening, they're going to be like, "That's not true. That's not how it goes." I'll do my best, but for the most part, once there's fire, you want to put water on it.
Mm.
But eventually, you need to find it, and you need to put it out. Now that depends on what type of structure, the size, the materials, the age, the use that it's for will depend on how that structure burns. Our job we need to do some type of search of every building. Like I mean, unless it's completely unsustainable for anybody to be alive in there, it's our responsibility to go and do a primary and a secondary search. Those are benchmarks at a fire, along with fire under control and fire out. But you just need to do it properly. I mean, we're trained to do that. You make sure that there's water available. You do it smart, but yeah, you're responsible to go in there and make sure that there aren't people in there. But at the end of the day, you need to put water on the fire as fast as possible. As soon as the fire's out, you can put way more effort into looking for people.
Yeah. So if you get to a house, say, I guess a good example is a house, because we have so many of these going up in flames lately. You get to a house and it's on fire. If somebody comes and says, "Oh, there's a person in there," do you like physically go in, or are you expected to go in, or are you trying to put the fire down to a certain extent and then you can go in? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, both can happen at once. Like sooner or later, you got to get in there. Like I said, unless it's completely unsustainable for life, we have to get in there. I mean, even in that circumstance, I think you'd be hard pressed to find crews that wouldn't want to get in there as quick as possible. But yes, you're expected to go in.
Yeah.
But we have excellent gear. We have the right trucks. We have, I think, relatively good training. I'm a big believer that we could train more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we know what to do in that situation. And it depends where they are too. I mean, if you can throw a ladder up and help them out a window, that's a very, very rare thing though. Pulling people out of fires, that's a once in a lifetime call.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that have been on 15, 16, 17 years. They've maybe pulled one person out of a fire. Now, cats and dogs, that's a whole nother story. We pull a lot of cats and dogs out of fires, and they are happy to see you when you run into them.
Yeah. Well, I imagine with all the technology nowadays, and you got smoke alarms in every single floor, if not multiple rooms on a floor, and there's so many ways out of the house. Like, yeah, the chances of you getting actually caught in a fire with nowhere to go, slim to none.
Yeah, you've made a mistake if that happens. And I mean, well, I'm going to rephrase that. Something has gone wrong if that happens. You might not have made a mistake. One of the biggest threats we have right now is with, we have these derelict houses and these abandoned houses, and there's a program with the city to fortify them. And I think that is the word that they use. So if you're driving around the stadium neighborhood and you see these abandoned homes with like white paint and heavy bolts securing the doors and the windows, that has been fortified. Unfortunately, people can still find their way in there, start fires, and we're responsible to go in there and get them. Now, it's incredibly difficult to breach some of these homes that have been fortified, for lack of a better term. There's no, all the windows are boarded, so all your egress is blocked.
Yeah.
So how do you safely go in there and do that? And that's one of the big questions we've had lately is, you can chainsaw all day through doors and windows, but it's a really bad idea to only have one way out.
Yeah. Well, and can you tell me about some of the other things you guys do? Because you were mentioning the story just before we started here, how you guys were spraying under the bridge and stuff falling on you, and some of the things you people might not think you actually come across, and it's like that actually happens.
Yeah, well, some of the stuff that we come across is wild. And I mentioned we work in the downtown core, and I have to mention that downtown core is absorbing what I consider an unfair amount of the city's issue with homelessness and opioid use. Like, it is really centralized in that neighborhood, and you can look at the paper and watch the news all you want, but until you've come down there and actually seen what's happening, maybe you can grasp it, maybe you can't. But I think it's important to understand what the downtown core is being asked to handle.
Mm-hmm.
So the story, that I was just mentioning is we went to a fire under the bridge by the funicular where people had actually gotten up into the wooden slats of this bridge going over, I think it's 98th Ave. I'm probably wrong. But so there's a fire up there, and the guys are spraying water, and needles like start falling from between these slats, and they're just landing on the ground.
Yeah.
And that's too bad that these kind of things happen.
Yeah, when you don't need to take one in the eye.
No, nobody wants to. Yeah, we all kind of made that joke. Like, can you imagine if a needle just fell on you and stuck you? I mean, it probably wouldn't happen, but.
Well, and I know fire has the high angle rescue, some of the other jobs you do. So your high level bridge, you have some of the water services, I'll call it, but like they go out on the boats.
Yep. Yeah. Well, the high angle guys are a specialty. So those dudes have some extra training, and they're based out of downtown, so they're pretty close to that bridge. They do go to the high level bridge a lot, unfortunately. The water responsibility kind of falls on anybody who's close to a static body of water or close to the river. Station 1, we're close to the river, so we have what's called like a swift water capability, and we have the boats that we can go out there. Now, that being said, that river is intimidating. Like, when there's lots of ice on there and things are really, really moving, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the embankments. They get really built up, and it's huge chunks of ice. And we had one call where somebody had jumped from the high level, and they this is in the middle of winter. They hit the ice. They hit it hard enough to crack it, and they kind of sunk in, but it wasn't hard enough to break through. So we just see this body laying out there. They ended up surviving, but I remember my partner went to put his foot out like he was going to kind of test stepping out there. Like, no way, man.
No.
You just see all these jagged ice, and as you kind of throw some rocks and stuff, see where there's like gaps, you can see like it's just big pieces of ice all jagged and crashed together, and there's a million holes everywhere. You have no idea where you're going to step and fall in. So definitely not worth it. So we end up calling fire. They bring the raft. They go out there and retrieve the person. So we obviously work in partnership for a million different calls.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I want to ask too, just because we'll be getting toward the end of the time here, but if with all the new high rises going up, and we've got the Stantec, and that's what 60 or 80 floors or whatever it's supposed to be. How the ladder truck only goes so high. So if there's ever a fire or you get some crazy event like a 9/11 event, like what are procedures to actually deal with things on floor number 60? If there's a fire or structurally the building's coming down, like what the hell do you do to get up there?
Oh, geez. I think that's one of those what if scenarios. I will say though that the newer the building, the better the integral fire protection systems are.
Yeah.
Like, one sprinkler is worth a lot of firefighters if it works properly.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So a building like Stantec has an incredible fire protection system built into it. We just supplement that system, and the city provided us with trucks that have the capability to support that fire suppression system. I mean, they wouldn't have been able to build it if we didn't have those trucks.
Mm-hmm.
But as for, if there's a fire on floor 60, as long as the stairway is still clear and we have egress routes, that's manageable. As for like a catastrophic structural collapse, I mean, I pray that 9/11's a one-off and that can't happen again. But I have no idea where you would start with that. I think you just do your best.
Yeah.
Get people out as quickly as possible. Keep those stairways clear of smoke, and go from there. Yeah, the ladder truck doesn't go as high as people might think.
Well, I just think about too when they had that. It was a windstorm those window cleaners on the side of the building. They were pretty high up, and yeah, you guys do some pretty interesting work.
Yeah, that was station one.
Yeah, trying to just rescue people from just the most random situations. You never know what's going to come. Every day is so different.
Oh yeah, and that's what I love about downtown. We do have a lot of the the same type of calls. Like I said, lots of opioid related, the person down calls where we just go check on them, see how they're doing, and then the abandoned house structure fires, or the abandoned house fires. But every day is different, and there's always something going on. And I mean, when the Oilers are winning, it's fun downtown. When the festivals are on, it's fun downtown. When it's -40, it's not fun anywhere. But, when it's nice downtown.
One thing I did want to make sure you touch on was some of the outside training and courses you do, because you do some traveling for those. You're teaching the TCCC we mentioned earlier to police and military still.
I do.
So can you just talk a bit about the teaching?
Yeah, I'm getting to be older, and I've had the blessing to have lots of experience and lots of opportunities, and they're kind of unique. But I always had a bit of a knack for teaching like good basic medicine to both medical and non-medical providers. I teach a lot of medicine at the fire department, which I'm glad to do with our advanced first aid course. I mean, we're just advanced first aiders, but we can do a lot if we use our basic skills and tools properly. You can make a big difference for a patient. So I do that for police and the military, and a lot of that is non-medical people being given a secondary task or a secondary duty of medicine. And a lot of that is I teach lots of the tactical police. Every region's got their different names for them, but I've done both coasts and central Canada, and then I do the same for soldiers. I just got back from a trip teaching TCCC to non-medical providers, and I've just always had a way of showing them how to do really, really good medicine without making it too complicated.
Cool. Is there anything else you think we didn't cover that you want to make sure we kind of talk about or get to?
No, I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you're doing here, and I hope it was a good conversation. I hope everybody makes it to this point in the podcast and hasn't turned it off 30 minutes ago.
You know what? I think a lot of people just put it on in the background and they just get sick of me first. So, but no, I appreciate you coming out, and we'll look to have you back on and talk about some of your other adventures that you go on. And maybe we'll have to get out to the range, because that's where we initially met. Was you were out at the Historical Arms Society at the range shooting one day, and I showed up there, and we just got to talking about some of the different firearms we have and some of the connections, because you have family that are police, and we know some of the same people, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I do have a lot of family members that are part of EPS, and I was always really proud of them. My godfather was a police officer. My uncles, cousins. Grateful for what you guys do.
Awesome. Well, I'll stop the recording here, and then we'll kind of chat offline. But thanks again for coming.
You bet, Nathan. Thank you.